on a sales video because I study my craft. I always try to figure out ways to improve my day-to-day flow. And there's this graph. I hope you guys can see it out there. But it kind of looks like an LA sign, right? So it's L and then A. And this is appropriate, and it'll all make sense in just a second, because this is in essence the call. This is your very first call. And right when you start the call, you build up the momentum, right? And right here is kind of, you're finding out the feelers, you're finding out what makes them tick or what have you. And I think that the main issue right now, where when the call starts, the sale or the actual pitch is happening too soon. Meaning that you get a call transferred over from customer service, and then they get transferred to you to say, hey Daniel, I got John on the line. I'm gonna go and transfer him now. Perfect. Hey John, this is Dan. What are you looking to do today? I got a 3.5% interest rate. I just want to lower interest rate and create some savings. And then from right then and there, from the start, too many agents or too many of us are pre-qualifying it. We're saying, oh man, this guy has 3.5. He's never gonna buy from me. He probably doesn't want to do his refinance. He wants a 2.5% interest rate fixed for free, and he wants me to do it right away. He wants me to put it in writing. And so it's very, it's very easy to immediately disqualify it and say, oh man, this isn't gonna happen, this isn't gonna work. But when you do that too soon, you're not giving yourself a chance. Not only that, but you're also burning the company's money, because it took a lot of time, effort, and resources to put that person on the phone with you. That person still has a need. And if it's an aggregate lead, I think it's safe to say that they're already in the process of doing a refinance. Would you agree? And that's exactly what we sell. But the issue is though, is that we hear something or we pre-qualify it. Like $20 to me is different to $20 to someone who's in rural Idaho. Does that make sense? So California, we kind of apply our life and our experience, and we use that to determine or justify whether or not we should give it 110% and proceed forward. And so going back to this graph here, imagine that this is the start of the call, and you say hello. You got to be able to work it up past this line. This money sign is where they buy, right? And so if you sell it too soon, it's not gonna hit them. If you sell it too soon without finding out what makes the person tick or what their motivation is, you're not gonna make the sale, right? So the key is, what do I do here? What do I fill in this spot with to get them above the buy line and where they'll buy? Because if you pitch it right here, they'll buy. You pitch it right here, they'll definitely buy. You pitch it right here, they'll buy. You pitch it, you oversell it and you go way too long, they're not gonna buy from you anymore. Now you've given them too much information to think about. And you might have heard from me before, like, hey man, just less detail, bro, less details. And there's a term that I had a sales mentor, when I first got into sales, he told me, he's all, you sound great over the phone, but you're just giving too much information. You're almost giving them way too much information to where they need to think about it. And if you recall back your last couple pitches, that's one of the main objections, right? Oh, I need to think about it some more. It's actually because of us. It's because we're making it hard for them to buy. And so what I'm going to cover here is how do I get them above the line to buy, right? And the script that I'm going to use, I've used for the last decade and a half. I've been using it for a very long time, and a majority of my background is in telesales, so I do it all over the phone. And you guys don't realize, but that is that's a skill set that a lot of people wish they had, because we're more efficient with their time. We don't have to go from point A to point B. I don't need to go to someone's office to go solicit business. I got the person right there on the phone right now. And so there are certain things that you could do from the beginning of the conversation that's going to give you a little bit more control. And so this is where I'm getting at. So from when you start the call, it is important that you quickly take control of that call and you steer the conversation. So for example, I'm going to give you an example of the wrong way to do it, and I'll give you an example of a way that I found works, and you can make a decision on what you feel is best. So the common response is, imagine if I'm the loan officer and we're talking to a client by the name of John. Hey John, my name is Daniel. I'm licensed in the state of Idaho to provide you with some information. What are you looking to do today? If you guys agree, that's probably the common response, right? Like, hey, how can I help you today? The problem with that is, though, is you're giving them back the mic and you're not controlling the conversation. Because if you let them respond, they're going to say, well, I got a 3.5. I saw an advertisement for 2.5 fixed, but they're actually talking about an advertisement for an arm. And when you receive that information, that actually messes up your game, right? Because sometimes you'll think like, oh man, I just got a rate sheet. The fucking rate's at 4.25. The freaking rate's at 4.25, right? And so you immediately kind of judge it and say, okay, you start backing off. There's no more sale. This position is sales. And the only way that you're going to be able to sell somebody is if you have their attention. Why do you think social media is blowing up so much? It's because that's where all the attention is. That's why all businesses now market their their Twitter feed, their Instagram, their Facebook. That if you look at a commercial, they hit that because that's where everyone's attention is. So the game of sales is, how do I get their attention? And this is how. So this is the method that I found work. This is the only technique that I'll use, regardless if it's an internet, if it's a trigger, demand, if it's an outbound. Hey John, thanks for holding. The reason why Julie's transferring you over to me is because I'm authorized to provide you with the information you need. But before I begin, I want to see if I can help you save some time. I'm going to ask you a few basic questions. This will let me know if I can move forward with our call. And if not, I'm going to point you in the right direction and help you save some time. And the reason why that's effective is because whether it's an aggregate lead, whether it's a trigger, demand, or what have you, that the common objection you get right now from all of your prospects is that I don't have time, or hurry up, or how can you help me, right? That's their main outlook. So when you say that right from the very beginning, you've not only taken control of the conversation, but now I can ask the right questions to figure out if that person's burning my time. Because if that person's burning my time, I'm not going to be disrespectful and then through the tone of my voice be like, oh, this guy, you're wasting my time. I'm going to be professional about it because I still have a way to network through that person. I still have a way to plant a seed and farm that lead out. They may not flip right now, but they could flip in 6 months, 12 months, or a year from now, a year and a half from now. Not only that, but let's say I can't flip the lead. Let's say they don't go through the right filters. I could still say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go and save you some time. Doesn't look like right now is the time for you. But if you know anyone, your family, your friends, your neighbors who can use this honest advice from a professional who's not going to try to sell them anything, then please pass my information. I can also help those you care about save some time. Now that's powerful. Now you brought them value. But going back to the opening pitch. So what happens when, after that, now they give you the mic back and they say, okay, cool, save me some time. So now the strategy is that you have to find out whether or not that prospect has these key ingredients, right? And these are basically the ingredients that make a loan. You have LTV, credit, DTI, product, benefit, and then you start framing the call for the close. Now, all of these happen on the first call except the close. I'm a strong believer that if you're pitching right now on the first call, you're not giving yourself the benefit, you're not giving your client the benefit. Because all the content that you've gathered in that first call, you need to be able to absorb it and translate it and apply it to the prospect, right? It's not all about like, hey, I got this rate, this is my fee, I could do it for free and I could save you $30 a month. That don't work no more. You got to be able to apply and tell them what they can do. It's not sell, it's, take your pitch and turn it into a collaboration with your prospect instead, and they'll feel like they're the ones making the decision, right? So after you take the control back, how I would go into it immediately. I'm going to start pre-qualifying them. So I'm going to say, okay, perfect. So this property right here on Myford, this is your primary residence, right? Yes, great. It looks like, and I got a property profile as well as the BV lead, right? And so on the property profile, I could see when they last refinanced. I could see comparable sales in the area, and I can also see how long they've owned the home. And so you have all these different factors of how they're tied. Why are they helpful? Is because if they've only owned the home for a year, which a lot of them have, these FHA leads, you now become the educator. Does that make sense? You've been doing it for longer than they have. You understand lingo that they don't. Now on the flip side, if they've owned it for 15 years and you see a track record of refinancing every year or 2 years, then you understand how to go about it. right? You could start pitching them long-term effect, like, hey, this could be the last refinance you do. Or you can pitch them on a strategy and say, hey, you're refinancing every 2 years anyway. Let this be the step that actually puts you in the right direction so you can stop refinancing. And so when you take the mic back and they get, okay, cool, Daniel, go ahead and save me some time. I'll say, okay, well, the property here on Myford, this is your primary residence, right? Great. And when was the last time you applied for a refinance? And that's a key question to ask up front, because it'll let you know how many players in the game there are, right? And especially with these aggregate leads, you know, sometimes you'll hear the phone blowing up in the background, and immediately, you know, human tendency, you'd be like, oh man, this guy's gonna talk to every lender. They're probably gonna talk to a broker. I have no shot here. And if you tell yourself that, you're the reason why you're not generating new loans. And that's just the unfortunate truth. But if you go about it and kind of strain it for everything that you got within that lead, like, you know what, I'm gonna find out whether or not I should tap dance and tell this person what I majored in, how many loans I funded last year. They don't care about that. They don't care about, honestly, they don't care about NAF. They don't care about your name. They don't care about you. All they care about is, how can you help me? Right? And so I need to figure out what their knowledge is. And so I'm asking questions about their LTV. So on the property profile, I know how much properties are selling for, and I know how much they owe. This is going to let me know if I should talk about VA product, if I should talk about an FHA product, if I should talk about FHA to conventional, right? And so again, this is kind of steering the conversation where it's going to go. And if it doesn't reach past a certain phase, then cut the tie. No need to go on. Besides LTV, you want to ask about credit. What's a good question on credit? You say, when's the last time you looked at your credit score? Great question, because then they'll tell you, oh, I looked at my credit score is 686. How did you get that info? Oh, I applied for a car, or oh, I applied for a credit card, or oh, I got Credit Karma, or oh, I did a refinance. It lets you know how reliant they are on credit. More importantly, it also lets you know what they know about credit, because sometimes you'll ask that question, be like, yeah, my credit score is 9. All right, bro, I got you. Does that make sense? So besides credit, you want to ask, of course, the declaration questions. I go through that first. A lot of agents do that last because it's on page 3. I'm right in it. I'm like, hey, any foreclosures, bankruptcies, loan modifications, debt consolidation programs that you've entered in the last couple years? If they mention one of those, then I know to steer my conversation. I'm not going to talk about a conventional product. I'm not going to talk about equity lines of credit, because I know that unless it's a government loan, they can't entertain someone who has a foreclosure or bankruptcy in the last couple of years. Does that make sense? And so in order to be more effective with my time, I'm just focusing on where it means most. But also another thing that you'd want to figure out is DTI. Is saying, you know, there's a method of asking personal questions like, what do you do for work? Or how much income do you make? Right? And so the effective way that I found is I don't go say, what's the name of your employer? What's their address? What's your title? What I do is make the entire application a conversation. And they feel like it's a conversation because I've done it so many times. I already know what pieces of information I need. Where I've heard on recorded calls, it sounds like an application. What's your name? What's your middle name? Is there a suffix? Are you married? Any kids? You know, it's boring, right? And you think about it, but to us, it's a process. So we think like, okay, well, we got to do this, blah, blah, blah. You know, so, but if you take a step back, you got to realize that that's an individual who just is more concerned about their time. And so that's where this graph comes into place, is that if you start selling too soon, you're not going to hit it right. You got to bring them up to a climax, right, a benefit above the line to where they're going to buy. And the only way that you could do that is finding out these pieces and how to bring them above that line. And so besides DTI, once you understand these 3, and believe it or not, you can figure this part out in the first 2 minutes of the call. Very simple. If you don't know how, then get creative. Figure out how to figure out these key components. Because again, this is what's going to save you time and avoid burnout. Right? You don't have to talk to 10 leads and spend 50 minutes on each lead because policy says so. We want you to be effective with your time, but more importantly, we want you to also understand that, you know, when you pre-qualifying these leads, be real. Don't say, oh, this guy's got 3.5, he's not going to buy, and that's a reason you disqualify or you inactivate the lead. I've sold, and my team, and there's plenty of agents in this room right now that has upsold a client from a 3 3/8 to a 4 3/8. Right? There are some prospects that we talk to say, you know what, I have a 3.5 fixed right now and I need a lower rate. And we'll completely disregard it. But if you would have taken the time to ask the right questions, you would find out that they're actually on an FHA. So they're 3.5 plus that 85 BIP MI puts them at 4.3. Does that make sense? But you wouldn't know if you just said, oh, 3.5, this guy's never gonna buy from me. Get frustrated and then move on to the next lead. You have to dig in. So these questions right here within the top 3 will help you identify which route, because all you are is a guide. They're coming up to you and say, hey, can you show me where I can get this? Or can you show me how I can create savings because I have a plan? But it's gonna come out different. What they're gonna say, and this is how they say it, I want a lower rate. They're gonna say, I want no fees, because that's all they know how to say, right? And if you receive that information exactly at verbatim, then it's gonna be discouraging, because we know where the market is. We know that the rates aren't that low. And so if I knew that my common objection was that I don't have time, I want the lowest rate, I want the lowest fee, I'm going to ignore those and just simply adapt. And so, when you go into the call, the questions, you've already set the tone, like Michelle said. You're setting up the expectation and you're breaking down their guard, right? Same thing happens with like your sales pitch, and the reason why I think that the close should happen on the second call is because, number one, a lot of aggregate leads have already made the determination that they're not going to buy on the first call. So no point in showing you my cards and showing you what I can do if you're still going to go speak to 7 other lenders, because there could be a chance that one of those 7 lenders are brokers and they're just whoring out the price. In the same breath, I also understand that prospect is not going to speak to all 7 companies. They're going to get frustrated and give up around 2 or 3 and say, okay, cool, I'm going to make a decision out of these 2 and 3, right? So don't think that you're going to go up against the world and you're not going to win. You're going to win as long as you find that emotional tie. And so going from these pre-qual factors to identifying the product that you're going to talk about, to understanding the benefit. Now, benefit is the emotional tie to your sale, and this is where all the bread and butter comes in. These questions that I'm going to cover with you are rigged in a way to get them to start thinking. So for example, if I got a rate and term prospect, and let's say he does have 3.5%, right? I'll use 3.25, 30-year fixed. And it's a conventional. And his very first thing he says to me is, you know what, I need to lower my rate. How I hear it is I need savings. That's it. I don't hear rate. I hear savings. And so I'm saying, okay, great. Let me go and ask you a few questions first. It's going to let me know if I can move forward with my call, right? And so in the conversation, after I figure out that I can move forward to the next section of the call or further with the conversation, I'll ask and say, hey, John, if I were to help you create savings, what would your plan be with the savings? Would you put it back towards the principal balance? Would you put it towards debt? Or would you put it in the bank? And their answer is going to tell you how you should tailor the rest of the conversation. They're actually telling you how to sell them, right? Another way is creating benefit is one of the very first few questions I'll say is, hey, you know what, I'm looking at your property profile. Looks like you got this mortgage with Chase for $300. Besides the mortgage, what other debt do you have? Like credit card debt, car loans. And they'll tell you right away, oh, I got about $15,000, $20,000 of credit card debt. Okay, how much do you send on those credit card debts? I send about $2,000. Okay, cool. Any car loans, blah, 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 timeshares. And so now I have a snapshot without pulling their credit of what leaves their bank account. Does that make sense? We all, as homeowners, humans, and just adults, we all have X amount of money that comes in, and X amount of money that leaves, and X amount of money that's left. And if you can find out how much is left, then you have them. You have leverage, right? In a society where over 80% of homeowners live check to check, this is something that we all need to adapt to and recognize.